Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Saumya Dave. I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Yeah. Dr. Dave is the author of Well-Behaved Indian Women and the forthcoming What a Happy Family. She's also a psychiatrist and a mental health advocate. And I have to admit, I chased you down, and you know this, but I chased you down to get this interview because a friend of mine shared the story about your querying journey. So you reached out to over 200 agents, ultimately found an agent and got a book deal through a preempt as a 2-book deal to Berkley Penguin. I mean, what a win. After all that, what a win. The reason I really want to speak to you is because so many of our authors have trouble with the querying process, which is completely normal. Mm-hmm. But what is heartbreaking is that many of them quit really early on because of it. And as you know, or as most people experience, the writing process itself is kind of awash with self-doubt. It's sort of your constant companion. And then when you add the agent rejections on top of that, for a lot of authors, it just becomes too much. And so it made so much sense to me that as a psychiatrist, you had the tools to demonstrate the kind of resilience that you did during your querying process. That's why I'm really excited for you to share that with our authors.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited for us to chat and to dig into this. And I appreciate you doing this because I'm sure when I was going through that process for the decade that it went on and felt like it would never end at times, I would have loved to listen to a conversation like this. So I hope this provides some comfort or at least some insight to those writers out there.
So before we dig into the querying part of your journey, let's kind of briefly touch on the background and your experience as an early writer. Your protagonist in Well-Behaved Indian Women, I think probably shares some similarities with you as an early writer. She's studied to become a psychologist, and she refers, or her family refers to writing as a hobby.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about your early relationship with writing?
Sure. So I grew up as a total bookworm. I loved reading series like Sweet Valley High and Babysitter's Club to learn about how cooler people were in the world. My parents were and are very strict, and so they didn't allow my siblings and me to date and to hang out on weeknights, and all these characters in these books could do things like that. So I think, getting access into a world that I was not part of just made me a very avid reader from a young age, and writing a book myself was this far off dream, but I didn't know anyone in any creative fields actually outside of writing as well. And so I thought it wasn't really something people do. It's just something some select lucky people might get to do with opportunities and connections. And by the time I was in high school, I realized that it was so hard for me to find books that had South Asian characters just living their daily lives and going through struggles with their families and their friends and their other relationships. I could find a good number of books based out of India and other places in the region that had to do with pretty big traumas and big events that had happened historically, but that day-to-day life, it was hard to find that. So at that point when I entered college, I thought, well, what if one day I write something that has to do with that landscape, something that's not out there? And as the years went by and I still couldn't find books like that told me, okay, there's space for this. It's not out there yet. It's certainly not out there enough for me to pick out even 5 books that represent that. So the initial seed got planted that way, and I thought that I would write a romantic comedy about planning a big fat Indian wedding. I don't know if you've ever been to an Indian wedding, but they usually involve so many events, so much food, so many unsolicited opinions, many overbearing, loving people. And I loved movies growing up that had to do with other weddings. And so I thought this could be great. So I initially started in 2008 writing a manuscript that had to do with the 3 characters who are in the book now, Simran, Kunal, and Neil. But it was strictly a love triangle. And it was about how Simran and Kunal were planning their wedding and how Neil comes as this outside outside force who puts a wrench in it. So I finished the first draft of that manuscript in 2009 and then thought, okay, great, I finished a draft. I am the coolest person ever. And now it's going to be on bookshelves by the end of this year, which shows you just how much I had to learn about the process of not only writing a book, but finding a space for it outside in the world.
I didn't realize that you had started in 2008.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's quite, so just walk us through a little bit of the sort of aftermath. When did you, so I didn't know when I first reached out to you, but you actually worked with us.
Yes.
On an edit. Was that, at what state? That was in 2019?
2016.
Okay.
Yes. So it was quite a while later. So even by those dates alone, it's clear that I really had no idea what I was doing. And I thought, okay, I have this book, I have an idea, I think it's fine, and so it's ready to go. And I would, of course, learn the very important lesson that often the first draft is just that. It's a first draft. And I think that it's so important to celebrate all those little wins. That's something that I wish I could tell my younger self if I could go back right now, that often writing is such a solitary process, and there really aren't that many people cheerleading if you get that paragraph down, or if you finish that chapter, or if you hit a breakthrough moment about a character. But really, all of those things are data points telling you that you have what it takes to keep going. And so when I finished that draft, I knew I could finish something, but I had no idea that then really another part of the work began by getting that revised, getting other sets of eyes on it, and getting those other perspectives that could help make it stronger. And that process, all of those things ended up taking most of the following decade. I realized that first manuscript that I wrote, it didn't have the elements that one would want when reading a book. Even me as a reader, there were things that I wouldn't have liked if I were to pick up that version of the book. And so I needed to learn about the actual craft of writing, how to build a story, how to increase tension, how to make characters fully fleshed out. And so, I was going to medical school at that point, and I couldn't go for an MFA, but I thought I could make my own MFA if I read enough craft books. So I got every craft book I could get my hands on. And I also started querying agents. And the very kind agents, most of them won't respond to you at all because they just get so many queries. But some of them who would tell me something, and that would help me as well. They'd say, oh, I like these characters or this idea, but it's just not reading well. I could put it down pretty easily. And so I compiled all of the rejections that had qualitative feedback in them over the years, and then would read the craft books, and I'd go back at it, go back to the manuscript and see how could I make it better. So it really was this push and pull of seeing, what are these rejections saying? What are these other books I'm reading saying? And how can I go again and again and revise this? And I ended up rewriting it probably from start to finish around 15 times. In that period.
That's great to have a number, because that's often what it takes, but it feels overwhelming when just to an author who's on their first draft, but it's good to have that expectation. You mentioned that you'd get qualitative feedback. How often did that happen?
So that was, I appreciate that question, because at first, it was not happening often at all. So I would get so excited if there was more than that standard form rejection. I'd say, oh my God, someone wrote a sentence just for me. And I would hold on to that sentence for that whole month and just try to analyze everything out of it. I realized that actually as my revisions were going on, the amount of qualitative feedback that I received also went up. And that also was another signal to me that there were more people who wanted to read more and to give back more feedback. And that also told me, okay, things are probably getting better. And again, because I didn't have any friends who were writers, I wasn't part of a writing community, which is another thing that I think there are so many more opportunities for now, even online. There are these amazing communities of really supportive writers. At that time, that was really the only thing I had to go off of, that, okay, now people aren't giving me a direct no, they're saying no because of this. And sometimes what would happen, and now when I look back, I think, what were you thinking, 20-something Saumya? This is ridiculous. But if someone would give that feedback, I would actually sometimes say, can we talk on the phone? Would you be open to talking on the phone? And I know that now that probably wouldn't work at all, but every once in a while someone would say, yeah, sure. And so I'd hop on the phone with a very kind agent who would give me their time for 10 minutes. And I would just take notes the entire time about what they liked, what they didn't like. And then I'd go back to the manuscript.
That's amazing. Was that, I haven't heard that before. Were those agents, if you can remember, mostly early on in their careers?
To be honest, it was a mix. And I found that so interesting as well, that I wonder if it was just a timing thing, that I hit their inbox right when, they were at their desk and feeling generous and taking pity on me. But I'm so grateful for that. And some of them also said, well, if you fix this part and rewrite, do a big rewrite, then maybe you can reach out to me again in a year or so. So that also was a part of what led to me querying them further, is that they would be at the top of my list when I would go back at it. And most of them ended up saying no all over again, which was totally fine. But they helped me so much because they gave me critiques, really. And they gave me critiques on their own very valuable time. And I'll always be so grateful for that.
Many authors in your position would think, okay, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe I can't write. Mm-hmm. So how did you, early on, when you weren't getting, maybe the qualitative feedback, how did you approach that?
So there were definitely many times I had that exact same thought. And actually, even after I worked with New York book editors, I had such a great experience. And I was so happy with the manuscript. I got another round of rejections. And I told my husband, maybe this isn't right. Maybe I'm not meant to do this. And this is a sign after all these years to just walk away with some grace and dignity intact. And a couple things I think kept me going. One was that I still was not able to find a book like the one I was hoping to put out in the world. So that told me, hey, there's still an opportunity for it out there. If I don't see that and versions of that, then there's still a space for it. The second was that I realized over the years that there really is no shortage of talent in the world. There's so much talent out there. People are doing incredible things and they're capable of so much. But there is a shortage of being able to get that encouragement and keep going when you're told that there's really no hope left. And so I thought, if 10 years are going to pass anyway, I want to know that at the end of that 10 years, I wasn't just someone who in high school wrote a nice sentence once. I want to be someone who gave it her all and really, really tried. And so I will know when I'm in my 50s and 60s that I did everything I possibly could to get to where I hope to go. I think those two things helped a lot. I also had the great fortune when I was in that process early on. So about 3 years in, I wrote for the New York Times for a summer. I won an essay contest at that time. And of course, an essay is so different from a book. It was much, much shorter. It was just a one-page essay. But one of the columnists who takes winners of this essay contest that he hosts, he had a talk with me and he said, I think there is potential here, but you'll have to do a lot of work to create a product. And I'm so grateful he told me that, because I think it hit me then that it's not going to just come to me. I'm going to have to really fight through a lot. But I also, coming from a brown community, a lot of people didn't understand why I was writing a book. And I was so embarrassed for the first few years when I felt like I had nothing to show for it. But at some point in that process, I don't know if it was 3-4 years in, that got stripped away, that need for approval, because I think it hit me that I'm not going to get approval for this. Nobody's going to say, congratulations, you queried again and got nowhere. And it stripped away all of the other external reasons I could have been doing it. And it made me center in on doing it just for me and knowing that I could do it and I could try again. And it didn't matter what people said. Up until that point, I was very driven by external validation, by grades and people saying, oh, you're doing the right thing and you're on the acceptable timeline. And writing was the first time ever in my life that I really played with failure and with rejection and uncertainty and people not being able to figure me out. And I think on a personal level, I needed that as well, to know that I was willing to strip all of those things away and do something just for the sake of doing it.
And as you went on, coming to that realization, did it make it easier? I think
it did. It was also lonelier at times as well. It was lonelier. But I would always think ahead for some reason. I don't know why. I've done this my whole life. I've always thought ahead of what I would think of myself as an old lady. And so I would picture that person and I would say, I think she would be disappointed if I gave up. I think she'd be disappointed. I think she'd rather that I tried for decades and still didn't get anywhere than not trying. And that helped a lot, I think, knowing that I was doing it just for myself. I wanted to see if it would happen. And it was really to prevent my future self from having regrets. I grew up with a lot of women who had a lot of regrets. You know, they immigrated here in their 20s, and they had to set up adult lives way ahead of their time. And that led to a lot of regret. And I think I internalized that somewhere along the way and wanted to make sure I didn't have regrets.
I think that's such a powerful thought exercise, imagining yourself as an old person. Usually I think of 80 for some reason.
80, yeah.
Yeah, that's the number.
Yeah.
You know, in my rocking chair, and kind of play through the different scenarios and which one I feel at that stage would give me more of a fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thinking about what writing means to you at your core, regardless of external validation, could you talk a little bit more about that? What you think it does for you?
I think, well, it does so much. I think it started out as a way to preserve experiences that I had not seen preserved before, and to feel comfort in not being alone in those experiences. You know, growing up, a lot of my friends and I would talk about things, you know, gripes against our parents and our communities and all these different things. And I found so much comfort in those conversations and in knowing that I wasn't alone in the things I was dealing with. And at some point along the way, I realized that's what my favorite books did for me too. They made me feel less alone in the world. And that's what I hoped to do one day is, you know, even if one person felt less alone because of something I wrote, then I will have done what I hope to do. So definitely now it comes from a place of just wanting to preserve these experiences and hopefully be a source of comfort for other people going through similar experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. When it came to researching agents or putting together your target agent list, do you feel like that process improved for you as well?
Yes and no. So at the beginning, I checked out Jeff Herman's guide to agents. And so I literally just sat there, and every agent who was interested in family fiction and diverse fiction and multicultural fiction, I wrote down on a list, and I just went down the list. Over time, I think I then started to Google agents, and sometimes I would see if, you know, within an agency were there multiple agents looking for similar projects, and could I do it that way. But actually, when I was in my residency over the last 5 years, I saw that there was an upswing of Twitter competitions where a lot of agents and editors participated. And I thought that was really great because a lot of them shared their manuscript wish list on the hashtag MSWL. And that was really, really helpful for me to find agents to pitch. And for anyone listening, that was a great way to also pitch without jumping to the query letter first, because if a pitch fit within the character limit on Twitter and an agent liked that, then they invited you to query. And at that point, there was a little bit of comfort in knowing that they were excited to receive your material. So that structure changed a little bit, which was great. And then I also was fangirling over so many authors over the years, because I just always think they're the coolest people ever, still fangirl over so many authors, that many of them offered really, really great advice and support as I was going through the rejections, and would sometimes say, why don't you try my agent, or at my agency, there's someone who may like this project. And so that also was a way that I ended up finding agents. It's actually how I came across the agent whom I have now, and she's wonderful. I love her so much.
Oh, great. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? So you would reach out to the authors you love over Twitter, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I actually started going to their book events. When they'd have book signings, I'd go and I'd be that awkward person in line, just so excited with the book to be signed. And I did that over a period of years, and then would just keep in touch with them over email. And I think that sense of community is so important because, again, it is a lonely process, but there are people out there who want to connect and want to be that bridge into the writing world. So I would keep in touch with them, and then I would email out saying, hey, I just got another round of rejections. Any thoughts on this? No worries if not. And they'd say, well, actually, at my agency, there's a new agent looking for multicultural fiction. Maybe you can just try her and see how it goes. So one of my friends, Roshni Chokshi, who writes amazing fantasy novels, middle grade and young adult fantasy novels. She is at the Sandra Dykstra Literary Agency, and she had mentioned that a newer agent was coming on and was looking for books about women's stories. And it wasn't her agent, but so she said, why don't you query her and see? And that's actually how I found my amazing agent, Jessica Watterson.
That's great to hear. And Jessica Watterson, even today, her description fits your book so well.
Yes.
What you're looking for, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think you brought up such a great point, because when agents do say no, it's not necessarily that they don't see potential in your work at all. It might be a fit about, what they're hoping to get on their list and what they're hoping to send out into the market. So there are so many other parameters than it's black and white that, oh, you're not a good writer, your story's not good, and you shouldn't keep going. And that's something I think I learned the hard way as well, that it's not always so clear cut, and there are a lot of other factors that go into it. But Jessica was looking for a diverse story at that point, and she had already had editors in mind to pitch the story to. So a lot of things just really came together in this beautiful way at that point. And it was funny because just a few months before that is when I had told my husband that I'm gonna give up, I'm done. And
really?
Yeah, it was literally 2 months before.
Done that before and then not carried through, or did you feel like that was a serious?
That was the most serious that I ever, where for a full month, I didn't even look at the manuscript. I didn't look at any query opportunities, anything. And that was the first time in 10 years I had ever done that, ever. And he said, I wore all black every day. And he was like, now you're being dramatic and you need to stop. And he really, really pushed me to go for it one more time. And he said, let's do it one more time, if you can take it and see what happens. And if it doesn't happen, I will support you in stopping. But he really didn't let me stop. And I'm going to forever be grateful for that, because I actually ended up getting multiple offers after that round. So you never know when that offer could be there. You never, ever know.
That's amazing. So after that turning point, because you continued to reach out, multiple agents offered representation?
Yes, I ended up getting several offers on the manuscript. And I do want to add that in between that time, I had done a full rewrite of the manuscript as well. So in the months before that, I had just gone down, done a full rewrite. And so it didn't look like the way it did during all those other submissions in the years prior. So it was basically a new book. But when I did the first round of reach outs, I got some rejections. So I thought, okay, maybe it's not meant to go anywhere. But that rewrite actually ended up being the one that got me people to work with. And I would have had no idea that it would have been that rewrite that did it. I had no idea.
Did you organize, did you have a spreadsheet or how did you organize? No.
I think the coolest and most organized people have that. I had heard of so many people having that. I did not have that. I had a Word document that had names, but it really wasn't, I've heard of people having these beautiful columns where they say queried on this date, reach out again on this date. I didn't have anything like that. I also, at that point, I was working at the hospital and then coming home, but sometimes I worked overnight shifts or weekend shifts. And since I didn't have one clear workspace or workstation, even as in a computer form, I would just email myself stuff. So it was very haphazard. I don't recommend that to anyone at all, but it came more as a function of just my other job being demanding and a little bit unpredictable at the time.
I think it's amazing that you managed to write a manuscript and so many revisions while working and going through a residency. I mean, I don't even know where did you find the time? Just scraps of time here and there, or?
Yeah, definitely. It was a fight most times. And when I started residency, I told myself that I have to tell myself that I'm having 2 jobs, because if I don't, then I will never, ever do this, because this first job is so intense and does require a lot of my time. So for us, whenever we worked an overnight shift, we had the entire next day off. And if we were on call on a weekend day, then we had the other weekend day off. And so I told my husband, that was actually right when we got married and moved in together. So we had been long distance for the years before that. And I told him, on these post-call days, I will be locked up and working on the book. And he said, yeah, you will be. You totally will be. So if friends would call and say, can you come over for this and that? He would actually say, no, she's busy. I can go, but she can't go. So that really helped a lot, pretending that I had a second job. I think that helped me have the structure that I needed to get done. I know some people do a really great job of writing, when they feel like it and digging into it when the moment strikes. But I would probably just watch Netflix all day if I went that way. So I knew also my vices, that I could binge watch a new series of something cute on TV, and I had to stop myself from that.
But that level of support from your husband probably meant a great deal.
It was the biggest reason that I think this happened. Actually, when we started dating, I told him I have this idea for a book, but nobody really cares and thinks this is worthwhile. And he said, no, I think if you have that, you should do it. And he made me realize that I do have creative impulses and dreams. Otherwise, before that, I just thought this is not going to ever happen for me. People always told me in college, when I expressed any desires of wanting to be a physician and writer, that I had to pick one. They said, nobody does multiple jobs. That's just not a thing. And I was always so confused, because I felt that as kids, we were encouraged to have so many different interests, and even in high school, to an extent that can be tough, we were encouraged to fill our plates with more and more and more. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, you can only do one. And he really taught me that doesn't have to be the case at all. And then when I met that New York Times writer, he also said, no, people make their own fusion careers all the time. You just have to find others who support that and can help you see the way.
I didn't know that term, fusion career. I love that.
That was just something, that he told me. I don't know if it's like an official term, but I thought it was great. Yeah.
It works really well, though.
Yeah, totally. And I think so many people have different interests, and it's part of what makes them feel alive is cultivating those.
Yeah. So and that's really interesting, because so many of the authors I talk to, their ambition is to become full-time writers, mm-hmm. But that's not your case. You want to continue to have both in your life.
I definitely love to keep practicing psychiatry and writing. I actually think they both help each other a lot, because I do therapy as part of my psychiatry practice, and it's literally learning about people's stories and seeing what made them who they are and what motivates them and what shaped them. And I find that to be so similar to fiction writing. So I appreciate it. I think it gives me a lot of fulfillment. And I think there's something to be said for my personality type to have a difference in work as well. I like interacting with people, and I like getting inspired that way and helping that way, and hopefully having an impact in that way. Whereas I think it takes another level of discipline to sit in your room all day with your laptop and shut out the whole world. I don't think that would fit for me, but I give props to people who that would fit for.
Yeah. We discussed a few tools for querying and dealing with rejection. Is there anything else that that you can think of that you used that was helpful, maybe a mindset or
Well, so more of a practical tool. When I was querying, I actually looked at Query Shark and other querying websites. There were, at that time, again, this was 10 years ago, things may have changed, but I looked at websites where multiple query letters were analyzed and picked apart, either by an agent or an editor or someone who just had seen many of those in their career. And that helped a lot, because I think oftentimes I didn't realize that I want to make that person keep reading. And so I would ask that question, what will make this person not want to stop reading? And the query letter is where it starts. So I actually printed out about 100 query letters from those sites. And I just spent a weekend analyzing those query letters and thinking, why are these such strong query letters? And how can I incorporate some of that into my own query letter? So that really, really helped a lot. And I think having a community of people who can read your work and provide that feedback can be super valuable as well, because it's hard to see it objectively when you're working on it all the time and when you're staring at it all the time. But I learned only after I was published that so many authors we have a Facebook group called 2020 Debuts for all of us who wrote our first novels last year. And so many people had been trying for 5, 10, 20 years. So the timeline is just the timeline, and everybody's is different. And I know that everybody often have, lofty goals of, by this time, if I haven't made it, then I'm a failure. It's not true. It's not true. There's so many other factors at play, and all we can do is just write the best book we can write and let it take the time it takes. There's a reason. If it is taking that time, there's a reason.
Yeah, you need it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the most damaging thing psychologically is having an expectation or a deadline. Yeah, I probably shouldn't bring, but apparently in Vietnam, the POWs who would always say, we'll be out by Christmas, or who would name some arbitrary date as to when they'd be released, they were the ones who fell into the deepest depression versus the ones who were like, we will eventually be released, but didn't have a set date.
That's such a great point, though. I think that applies to so many people, and definitely to writers, that it will get there someday, but it may not be the time that you think. There was a mentor who once told me, and it was actually about another thing I was working on, but I've always gotten back to that advice. She said, expect everything that you're working on to take at least 3 times the amount of time you think it will.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so helpful, because I think that our society does operate on fixed timelines, and there can be value to that. But when it comes to more creative things that you're learning as you go, that may not always fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And on immediate gratification, everything's just so fast now with technology that we're using.
Social media, totally.
Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
That's so true.
Was there anything about your agent, Jessica Watterson, especially since you had multiple offers, how did you decide to work with her?
So she was extremely enthusiastic and had a plan. And I thought that was so incredible. So she said, I already know this person, this person, this person, this person who is looking for something like this. And I will get this sold in a matter of months. And so I think that confidence and that plan really won me over. And there's also a chemistry factor. It's not that different from dating, where you just want to feel comfortable talking to the person, knowing that you're working with them for a long, long time on really important things, and that you feel good about it. And I felt that the second we spoke on the phone. I also really appreciated that the agency that she's a part of is a great agency, and they represent many authors I really, really adore. They have a lot of South Asian authors. They have a lot of authors of color. And so I just felt like I was going to a place that aligned with what I hoped for in my own career.
Right. And she came through. It was a preempt, a 2-book deal. So tell us a little bit about, also for authors who may not know what a preempt is, what that is and what it felt like.
Sure. So she very much came through. We worked on some minor edits for a couple of months, and then it was the summertime. And I had been hearing from people before that, oh, nothing happens in the summer in publishing. No, it's not going to go anywhere. Don't worry. So when she comes and she says, oh, we're going to get this sold over the summer, I thought, okay, wow, this is the opposite of what I've heard before. But she made a list of a bunch of editors at these really, really great places, and it all just felt like this surreal dream, and said, oh, these are all people I know, and they're all interested in something like this. And then what happened, which I thought this was so cool, she went to a conference at the beginning of the summer, and then we had planned to send out this pitch list at the end of the summer. So she went to this conference, and then she comes back from the conference and she called and she said, oh, actually, most of the people on this first round were at the conference, and I was giving them little just like inklings about your book. And they said, please send it to me right now. And I said, well, maybe I'll see. So by the time she actually submitted the official manuscript, there were multiple people just excited about it because she set it up in such a great way. And that helped a lot too. So we had an offer within 2 weeks, I think. So she actually removed it from submission from half of the list after the first couple of weeks, because we ended up getting multiple offers. And then withdrew. So when there are multiple offers, a preempt can happen, where the publisher basically says, okay, we're all in and this is our best deal yet, but then we get to have it and all the other offers go off the table. So that's what ended up happening with the amazing Berkley publishing team.
And was the 2-book deal your idea, or Jessica suggested it to sweeten the deal?
That I appreciate that question, because funny part was that when I was giving up the year before, committed to giving up, I thought, because this new rewritten version of the manuscript wasn't working, I actually started a second manuscript, because actually I had an agent tell me, oh, I don't think this idea is going to go anywhere. You should find something else. And I said, oh, wow, okay. So I took that advice to heart, and I started writing a new manuscript. And when I was then talking to the editors who were interested in the book months later, they all asked, do you have ideas for a second book if we were to just throw that out there? And I said, well, actually, yeah, I've written 50 pages of a second book, and it's about this, this, and this. And they said, okay, great. And then they actually all ended up offering 2 book deals because they liked the way that that second book sounded off the bat.
What valuable advice, and how incredibly helpful it can be to have that second book in mind and to have started working on it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it was a great lesson in knowing that, you know, if you have creative impulses, that's a limitless thing, and you can always create more. And that, you know, I don't say that to deter anyone from a band like working on their first project whatsoever, but just know and have confidence in the fact that there's always more coming in, because it's about how you're seeing the world and processing the world, and that's really what we need for storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that we might have missed out that you'd like to share with authors, either during the querying process or the writing process?
I think that if anybody is going through these repeated rejections, I think that it might be worthwhile to take some time away, because it's emotionally really draining. At least I found it to be pretty brutal in that sense. And to see if there's any information coming from those rejections, and if there's a path forward that feels comfortable for you. Because like you said earlier, every rejection is not the same at all. And often they are just information. And so maybe that information does mean that this is not the right direction at this time. But it might also mean, hey, with a couple tweaks here and there, with the rewrite, things might be a little bit different. So I would just encourage people to look at each rejection in the light for what it is, instead of it being, hey, this is a no, you have no future here, because that really might not necessarily be the case at all.
And how that, I forgot to ask about the frequency with which you queried. Was there any consistency there, or did it vary based on your revisions?
I wish that it did. Every time I would finish another rewrite of the book, I would do a big round of queries, but there were times where I would just send out queries. If I was at the hospital and, you know, it was the middle of the night, I would just say, let me try for this and that. So I didn't have that organized of a process, but I did find that it was a bit of a numbers game. So the more that I, you know, sent out, the more that I would get a response. And of course the response was a no many times, but I'd still get something. And I think that helped me make patterns out of it, and to see if there were certain common threads. You know, I'd heard a few people say, oh, the voice of the main character isn't really coming through to me in these first pages. And so when I read that 3 times, I thought, okay, maybe it's time to revisit those first pages and see how can I hook someone in and make them not want to put this down. You know, this is a process where rejection is inevitable. That's, I guess, something I also wish that I knew. I thought that rejection only came if you weren't doing a good job, but really it's actually just a sign that you're putting your work out there and you're trying to get somewhere with it. So I think that's also something that I wish I knew back then, that it's inevitable. Even the authors that are at the top of their game and making these incredible books year after year, they experienced it at some point along the way.
And that's a great way of reframing it. The fact that you're getting those rejections means you're continuing to put your work out there and continuing to learn from the rejections as well.
Yes.
And it is important. We started off this interview with you saying to reward yourself for those things.
Yes. Yes.
Celebrate.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What were you saying?
And to recognize that it's a big deal that you keep putting yourself out there.
It is. And it deserves to get a pat on the back as often as you can allow that, because again, there really often aren't people in your cheering squad because you sent off a query letter, but it is a big deal. You're putting yourself out there, you're taking a risk. And those are things that I think people should be proud of themselves for. And those are big steps, and all those steps deserve some sort of celebration, because they're not easy at all. So that's again why I think the community can really help so much. I've just seen over time that the people I know who had that writing community where people could read their work and talk and connect and even provide that comfort, it's helped a lot through those dark moments that come for everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being, so open and honest in this conversation, but also in public on your Instagram, and, continuing to share your story, which, not many authors want to go back to that period and talk about, how long it took. you know, as if, I don't know, maybe there's a sense that maybe readers won't take them as seriously. So thank you so much for sharing, you know, your journey.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and enjoyed this.
I had no idea that you, at the very end, you were truly thinking of giving up.
Yeah, literally just 2 months before I got the offers, I was ready to put it away. I mean, I had put it away actually, and Saumya said, you know, you have to try one more time, because all of the reasons that you wanted to do this in the first place still stand. There still aren't books with South Asian characters living day to day. And, you know, he said, well, you're just beaten down by the process, but not really the purpose. And I thought that was really, really helpful, because sometimes you can just get burnt out by just getting no's after no's.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement, but not the purpose.
Yeah.
It's the purpose that can keep you going. Yeah.
Totally.
But I'm happy that even at that stage, it wasn't that you had given up on writing. It was that you had put that first manuscript aside and were working on another one. So I think that's a very important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I considered many times walking away from it, but I do think people, no matter what their passion is, when they have that, it's something they can't stop. You know, they can maybe walk away for periods of time, and they might even need to. But I do feel like anyone I know who's really passionate about anything they're doing, it comes back. That desire to do it does come back. And that's a sign too, that it's maybe worth pursuing and seeing what happens with it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It's sort of like, you can't let it go. It's sort of got its tentacles around you, and yeah, that's it.
No, absolutely. There was one time I was talking about it and I was like, it's like a barnacle, and it's there. And so, yeah, maybe you can take 6 months, a year, whatever it is, but it will come back if there's that need to tell a story. I think it's this urge that doesn't go away.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about your next novel. When is it coming out?
June. It's way sooner than I realize sometimes. It's coming out in June 22nd. So like about 11 months after the first one.
Oh, wow. So much faster. Look at that.
Much faster. And a very different process, because that first one I worked on for a decade plus, and then this one, you know, in a year, just had to turn it around. So it was with a baby and a pandemic. So it was a very different, very, very different process.
You know, it's not so uncommon, that story, how long the first book takes, and then the second one is within a year.
Yes. It's so funny, like how it feels like night and day. It really does. And then you're like, wait, how is there already a second one? I'm just processing that there was a first one. So yeah. I kept calling the first one my baby, and then I got pregnant, and I was like, I should probably stop saying that. So then I started calling them both my babies, but now they're both my babies.
Now 3 babies.
Now 3 babies, yeah. I actually, in Well-Behaved Indian Women, Neil comes into the picture and just basically tells the main character, Simran, that, you know, she has to go after what she wants and take risks and all of that. And that was completely inspired by my husband in every way. That character and what he helps the main character do was all him.
Oh, but you had to take that and find the fortitude to actually act on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's been such a great change in the publishing industry towards diversity, and that continues to happen. So that was also nice. I felt like I came in at a time when that was becoming more of a stable thing, instead of a fluke, or, oh, this is our one diverse book of the year that we're going to push. But now it feels like there's so many authors from different backgrounds, and I hope that just continues to be the way things are.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I mean, given what agents say that they're looking for and what they're representing now, it seems that it's finally here to stay. Yeah. And it's going to be a major, you know, part of publishing.
Definitely.
So thank you again, Dr. Dave. Really, really appreciate today's interview. And how can authors learn more about you? Your website, of course, and
sure.
Is your book available for pre-order? Not yet.
It is. The second one is available for pre-order at all retailers, and it's called What a Happy Family. It'll be out June 22nd, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Saumya J Dave. It's SAUMYA JDAVE.
Great. We'll link to it also below the video.
Great. If anybody wants to hear about how many times I've fallen flat on my face, I will talk about it.
Thank you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care.